The bright side of addiction is recovery. Recovery is as recovery does. And our special guest on this edition of Recovery Coast to Coast certainly exemplifies that. In this edition of Recovery Coast to Coast, a conversation with one of America's top recovery ambassadors, Joe Powell, a grateful man in long-term recovery.
Recovery is a process of change to improve our health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach our full potential. So that's every day. Like what you just meant, every day, how am I going to improve, right, my health and wellness to live a self-directed life, on a daily basis?
From the streets of Harlem in New York City to the heights of respect in Texas and around the country, he lives his life as an example for others that indeed the bright side of addiction is recovery. We're going to meet Joe Powell and hear his powerful story of devastating addiction and then climbing to the heights of long-term recovery. Joe is celebrating, and we celebrate along with him. 33 years in long-term recovery, and we'll do that in just a couple of minutes. And later in the podcast, we're going to hear from legendary actor Dick Van Dyke, who talks about how anything can happen and valuing recovery. I'm Neil Scott, host of Recovery Coast to Coast. Following 15 years of national nightly broadcasting on iHeartRadio in Seattle, we've now upgraded to a national podcast, available to anyone at any time, featuring interviews with clinicians, authors, recovering celebrities, and everyday people in long-term recovery, and vetted resources for individuals, families, and friends. We invite you to enjoy our podcast and share it with your friends as well. Recovery is as recovery does. We'd love to hear from you, by the way. You can drop us a note at recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. Let us know your thoughts about the podcast, and perhaps you have a subject or maybe a guest that you would like to suggest. Again, that's recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. Recovery Coast to Coast is supported by Sundown M Ranch, one of the oldest, most successful, and most affordable addiction treatment centers in America. They have successfully treated well over 200,000 adults, adolescents, and their families for the past 50-plus years. It's where recovery becomes reality. Sundown M Ranch is a nonprofit organization, so they can keep their costs low. They own 30 acres at the mouth of the Yakima River Canyon, just outside of Seattle, Washington. In addition to treating adults, Sundown M Ranch has a nationally acclaimed adolescent program, which is gender-specific, with each individual supported by a team of addiction professionals. A great number of staff at Sundown M Ranch actually went through treatment themselves at the ranch, and they can understand what each patient is going through. Each patient treated with respect and dignity. Now, if you have any questions, you can certainly contact them at info@sundownem.org or through their website, Instagram account, or Facebook page. And if you want to talk to one of their amazing staff, their toll-free number, 800-326-4444, sundown.org. I recently spent a week down in San Antonio, Texas, where I was the MC for the 47th Annual TAP Conference. Now, that's the Texas Association of Addiction Professionals, where I had the opportunity to meet a number of new people in recovery and catch up with longtime friends who continue to travel along the recovery roads. In particular, Mr. Joe Powell, who I met some 20 years ago at the birth of Faces and Voices of Recovery. I was there with my mentor, Mel Schulstad, who was the founder of NADAC, that's the National Association for Addiction Professionals. The Recovery Summit was held in St. Paul, Minnesota, and included people in long-term recovery, along with their families and their allies. And at the public helm of that meeting was Senator Paul Wellstone of Minnesota, who died tragically in a plane crash in 2002. He and Patrick Kennedy and Senator Jim Ramstad, both in long-term recovery, authored the historically significant Paul Wellstone Mental Health and Addiction Equity Act of 2007. Joe Powell was up front and center at that meeting and at thousands of meetings of recovery advocates since 2001. We are publishing this podcast on October 8th, and today Joe celebrates 33 years of long term recovery. He walked into the rooms for the first time on his birthday when he turned 37. Today, he's 70, and he's blessed with 33 years of an amazing life in recovery. And we welcome you back to Recovery Coast to Coast, America's voice for recovery. And, oftentimes we take you to various places around the country. At least we did before COVID. And now the COVID is letting up a little bit. The good folks down in Texas at TAP have had an in-person conference, first one I've been to since, obviously, COVID began. And TAP is the Texas Association of Addiction Professionals. And an award winner from the TAP conference this year is my good friend Joe Powell. I've known Joe for 20 years. We were in the same room 20 years ago when Favor was launched. Remember that, Joe?
I do.
I'm sure you do. My goodness. And we're still at it. We're still trying to move forward, and one conference at a time.
That's it. One day at a time.
For people who are not familiar with Joe Powell, give us a thumbnail sketch, if you would.
Oh, well, I will. My name is Joe Powell, and I am a young person in long-term recovery. And what that means is...
that you're a teenager. You said young person, right. So I figured you were...
That's right. I'll only be 70 years old next month.
Really?
October the 8th, right?
October 8th, 70 years old. Holy smokes.
Yes. So, and also with that...
You'll never be younger than you are today, Joe.
That's right. I have 32 years of sobriety, and it also will be 33 years October the 8th. Right.
You did it on your birthday.
I did it on my birthday. Got sober on my birthday.
Was that by design?
That was God deal. That wasn't me. All that.
I say there's no such thing as coincidence. It's God incidence.
That's right.
And that sounds like a God incidence to me.
You know it. That's right.
No kidding.
Yeah.
What happened on that day?
Well, it was really 2 weeks before that when I really went into the rooms. Somebody brought me and said, hey, there's a bunch of drunks around the corner there at this church that I want you to
You may
meet.
qualify.
That's right. You may qualify. You want to go with me? I said, all right, let me see what is going on over
Tell me
there.
about that first meeting.
And that first meeting, man, and they said, hey, I couldn't believe it, first of all, that all of these folks were just like me, and but they had something that I didn't have,
But you wanted.
I wanted it. And they said, well, in here, though, you got to get a sponsor. I said, a sponsor? What's that? I said, don't worry about it. Just ask that old dude over there. And that old dude over there was the one that I asked, right? They said, don't tell him, you got to ask him. So I did ask him politely, right?
Yeah.
And he said, hey, okay, well, call me at my pager and call me at home and call me on these two.
Pager. Now that takes you way back.
Right. Well, we didn't have cell phones, right?
I know it.
32 years ago. And sure enough, but he scared me. My little post-traumatic stress disorder kicked in with fear, all consumed by fear, because he said, call me at these two hospitals. Now, of course, when you're trying to get sober, you don't want no doctor, right?
Yeah.
And so, but on the way out, I said, who's that guy that just not talk to? He said he called him at the hospital. I said, oh, that's Dr. Deere. He's a psychiatrist. No, not a psychiatrist.
You getting a little paranoid there, Joe?
Yeah. And I ran and got me a drink right after.
I called Paranoids Anonymous, and they gave me the wrong address. Anyway, so did you call him?
I did. Took 2 weeks. On my birthday is when I surrendered.
Okay.
That's right. Totally right there. And I said, look, Lewis, I'm ready. And he said, great. Come on over to the house. So meet me over here. I think I came over to his house, matter of fact.
Yeah.
And that's what it took right there. I mean, from that day, he worked with me, and to have a psychiatrist who also was in the program that was
great.
able for 31 years. He was he passed 2 years ago.
Oh.
Right. And I named a building after him in Dallas right now. There's a Dr. Lewis E. Deere Behavioral Health Complex right now.
Good for
and
you.
That's my sponsor, right?
Wow.
So I would love, everybody to visit.
We're losing so many of these old-timers that played such a significant role. We just lost Dr. Joe Persh.
Mm.
Dr. Persh just died at the age of 92. He
Wow.
was the one responsible for the intervention with Betty Ford, Billy
Mm.
Carter, Larry Gatlin, Buzz Aldrin, all these
Wow.
people. So we're losing these
Yeah.
older folks, and it's important that we keep their name alive. And I
Yes.
salute you, Joe, for keeping
Mm.
Dr. Deere's name
Mm.
alive for years and hopefully decades to come.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yes. It was an honor. I mean, he helped a lot of folks.
Mm.
He served a lot. You know what I mean? I mean, people just went to him, and he had, he the one that taught me too. That was strictly peer to peer. When you talk about peer to peer,
Yeah.
even a psychiatrist or a doctor, it doesn't matter. He knew we didn't talk about diet. You know what I mean?
Right.
We
Right.
talked about recovery. Is
Right.
all we talked about. So,
Yeah.
and he
Yeah.
was the one that really
What
helped
was
me.
the first year like for you?
Wow, staying sober.
Yeah.
Well, I was just hanging out with folks that was older than me that had the wisdom of the program that really knew how to support and knew what peer. That was strictly peer to peer, you know what I mean? And so in 1988, that was kind of hard, but he did tell me, look, you're going back to school so you can learn a little bit more. Cause having a family of seven brothers and one sister, and my dad who was who died from alcoholism,
Mm.
then yeah, that was I needed to know why I couldn't stop drinking. Why was my family? Why did my dad have to die? You know what I mean? And I didn't know about the disease of alcoholism. And so, yeah, that was a learning experience. And it was about just really just suiting up and showing up. I didn't have to speak up. You know what I mean? It was
Just
just about
show up.
just show up. That was it. And then just absorb, the program. And how did these guys stay sober? Because here I am from Harlem, New York City. And you know what? Nobody never told me. That's why the work that we do today is so important to be loud about what we do today. Because even in New York City, nobody didn't say, you know what? Your dad don't have to die like that. There's a place around the corner with a whole bunch of drunks getting sober. Here I'm seeing my father, hurt my mother and hurt my family, and then constantly and dying in this, what I mean, from this disease of alcoholism. And I didn't get that.
Mm.
And so that's what we do. That's why coast to coast with Neil is
Yeah.
so important,
Yeah.
right, to what we do. Because we got to be loud for people to see. The communities
We
need
got
to
to be
know.
loud and we got to be proud.
And we got to be proud about it. That's right. That's right. And I had somebody just tell me that the other day. That, hey, man, you're pretty confident. I never heard that before. People say
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
look confident. I guess that was part of being proud
Yeah.
of really being a person in the
People
culture.
still miss the fact that recovery is an American way of life. When they think of alcoholism, when they think of addiction, they
Yes.
usually think of someone they know who is still in the throes of their disease
Hmm.
and it's not good. But if you look at the bright side, and that's why, back in 76, I did a telethon with Dick Van Dyke.
Wow.
I was running the National Council on Alcoholism in Santa Barbara,
Mm-hmm.
and they said, you can go outside the box and be creative. So I said, how about doing a telethon? We need to raise money. And they said, a telethon? Like Jerry Lewis? I said, exactly. And they said, what are you going to have, a poster drunk? I said, no, no, you're missing the point. The point is recovery. The point is the bright side of this disease
That's,
is recovery. And
that's
then
it.
it came to me, the bright side of alcoholism is recovery. The
That's it.
bright side of addiction is recovery.
That's it.
And I've been carrying that forward ever
Hmm.
since the mid 70s.
Wow.
It is so important to let people know that when people get well from alcoholism and addiction, they become weller than well.
Yes.
And I've repeated, I'm like a broken record. A lot of treatment programs have relapse prevention. I don't use that term anymore. You know what I use? Recovery enhancement.
Wow.
How is your recovery better today than
Right.
it was yesterday? That's
Yes,
what I
yes,
want to
yes, yes,
know.
yes.
And how is it going to be better tomorrow than it was today?
Right, right,
When
right.
you talk relapse, it almost gives people who are newly sober an out. Well, I can always go out one more time.
Mm,
Yes, you can,
mm.
but you may not have another recovery in
That's
you.
right.
You
That's right.
may not.
That's right.
So, recovery enhancement, enhance your recovery. And you have been such a model, not only in Texas, but nationally, for keeping recovery first and foremost.
Right, right.
Recovery first.
That's it.
Because without
That's
it,
it.
you ain't got shit.
That's it. That's it. And those are the guiding principles that we have, even as a recovery organization. That I'm the president of now. But recovery first. To
Yes.
just that's it. I mean, recovery first, inclusion, authenticity, strength based, and it's a participatory process. That means that everybody. I love it what you said about the enhancing on even the everyday,
Yeah.
right? Because when we went to SAMHSA and we created the definition, SAMHSA brought us up there and 20
Yeah.
of us over there, 10 from the mental health side, 10 on the substance use side, and they said, look, you got 2 days to give us a for the
Hmm.
whole country as
Yeah.
far as
Yeah. I remember
treatment
that.
and recovery. So and it says a recovery is a process of change to improve our health and wellness,
Yeah.
live a self-directed life, and strive to reach our full potential. So that's every day. Like what you just meant, every day, how am I going to improve, right, my health and wellness,
Yeah.
right, to live a self-directed life, on a daily basis.
Recovery enhancement. You have been in recovery for 32 years. At what point did you decide that you wanted to be more than just a person in recovery, but a voice for recovery?
Wow. Well, watching my sponsor, I think, one, because he was also, a clinical person, that had a treatment center, and then, but watching that and then getting into, like I said, he sent me right back to school. And then, of course, took 2 years. And then I actually took the test and became, back then it was KDAC. And then, of
Hmm.
course, in 94, when
Yeah.
we moved over to licensure. So, but that same test and becoming a licensed chemical dependency licensed drug and alcohol counselor, right? Then that right there moved my advocacy level and also just being sober. I think with sobriety and recovery, knowing that today we say, and I always tell folks that, we're all advocates,
We absolutely.
first.
We all have a role to play in
Yes,
advocacy.
we have to know that
Yeah.
we have to promote recovery out loud,
Yeah.
and that's the advocacy work that we all play, right? So yeah, so everything that we doing here, even at this conference here, is all about advocacy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So when you talk about the tap, so that was, I think it was gradually gotten into the, hey, that I've got a voice here by just being a person in long-term recovery or in recovery period and watching the other recovery, and even how do we serve and help others, right? As sponsors, right, and giving back. How do we be of service? All of that right there is about really this move, the change that I was making as a change agent that I am today. I mean, it's all about recovery, right?
Yeah.
And how do we do that?
What do you see as the biggest challenge over the next, say, 5 years for the
Mhm.
recovery movement?
Wow. Now that's huge right there because we still, like I said, is not heard loud enough yet. And there's communities still today that they really don't know what recovery is. And I think that first of all, what I mean, is for us, because right now, I mean, I don't know if you know Greg Williams,
Oh,
of course,
sure.
from the Anonymous people, right? He
Yeah.
called me at 7 o'clock in the morning yesterday morning, about the congressional hearing, briefing, as he called it. And one is, of course, is that the substance abuse block grant, right? And so, of course, the president have put $350 billion, and but he in the addiction substance use block grant, but he carved out, he made 10% set aside specifically for recovery. So that's where the advocacy is at now. So now, if we can get that 10% set aside in the block grant, that's also going to enhance and provide more recovery,
Yeah.
spreading recovery out
Yeah.
on other. So when we say, Bill White is the one that says, of course, our purpose, right, is to spread recovery. And so wherever I go and wherever we are, we have to spread recovery. There's many places in communities, especially communities of color, too, very much that they still don't know. But we said that we honor all paths of recovery.
Yeah.
Can we honor all paths
That's the
of recovery?
challenge.
That's the challenge
Yeah.
right there. And getting it out there,
Yeah.
right? And being loud about that
Yeah.
too. And that's why Greg called me too. He's like, okay, Joe, you know what, you're right. We need to have African American to show how does even the set aside going to get into the black community,
Mm.
right? And I'm excited about that because we can go, these communities are not really getting it. So in the communities of color, or Latino, you know what I mean? Now we got a lot more that's coming as far as cultural communities that has to be really served, and recovery needs to be allowed throughout this country.
We
So
got to get as much money into the community as
yes,
possible, and not into the bureaucracy
r-
of the states
r-
and federal.
that's
We
it.
got to get the money down to where it's going to do some good.
Right. That's
Yeah.
the advocacy work right there
Absolutely.
that's going on right
Absolutely.
now with that.
Tell me about Favor. Favor's got a meeting coming up as well. I guess it's going to
Yes.
be virtual.
Yes. And we hate that it's going to be virtual, because
Yeah.
we was looking forward, man, to come together, man, and
Oh, I know it. 20
me and you
years.
hanging
I
out
know it.
again, man,
Same
in
room, same
Minnesota,
time.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Oh,
Yeah. It's been 20 years since we all
yeah.
500 of us came
That's right.
together. That's right, with Senator Paul Wellstone.
Yep. That's
That's
right.
right, and so that was great, Bill White, all of us, right? So again, with this 20-year anniversary, Faces and Voices of Recovery, and initiating Faces and Voices of
Yeah.
Recovery,
Yeah.
that was great. All of the advocates and founders and all of us was looking forward to coming together in Minnesota. And I was, of course, and me and you was a
Yep.
couple of those that was going to be honored, as
Yep.
it was honored to be there with us. But it looks like they're going to move toward a virtual conference because of COVID today. But yeah, we're still looking forward for all of us celebrating again this 20th year
Yeah.
anniversary. Right.
The important thing, Joe, is that everybody who is in recovery has a role to play.
Yes.
And to speak
Everyone.
up, to stand up. And people say, well, I can't be an advocate. I can't go to D.C. Well, you can write a letter to your congressman. You
Right.
can make a phone call.
Right.
You can write a letter to the editor. I mean, there's a number of things that you can do,
Right.
and to let people know in your own community
Mm-hmm.
that you are in recovery.
That's right.
When I ran the NCA program, I had these buttons made up called "Ask Me About Alcoholism," and I would tell people, if you wear this,
Mm-hmm.
make sure you got enough time to talk, because people are going to say, what do you mean ask me about alcoholism? I have an aunt who, I have a brother, I have a, and you're going to talk about
Right.
then talk about recovery.
There you go. There you
Talk
go.
about the miracle of
Right.
recovery and what happens when people find their way into recovery, whether it's into the rooms,
Yes.
whether it's into the church,
Yes.
whether it's into the university. I don't care what your path is.
Right.
I just want you to have a
Yes.
path.
That's it. Please, please have a path.
Yeah,
That's right,
yeah.
because every one of us do. And the cool thing about paths is that most all paths have principles to live by.
Right.
And these are recovery principles. So whether you're a faith-based Christian, there's Christian principles,
Yep.
there's 12-step principles, there's a red road to recovery with Don Coyers there, the principles, recovery unplugged, you name it. All of them have principles to live by. And I love that about recovery. And today, for me, I have principles to live by, and I live by those too.
In recovery, the doors are wide open.
Wide open.
Come
Always.
on in.
Please, you are welcome.
Come on
That's
in.
right. That's right.
Joe, it's great
Yes.
seeing you. Thank you so much. It took me a while to track you down at the conference, but I was not going to leave here until I had your ass in that seat talking about it.
Right. But there's one thing that I just want to at least say thank you to, especially since we're here at this conference here, and I got this national award through NADAC, right? And the NADAC president, Dr. Johnson was the one. I want to thank her. Of course, I want to thank Sherry with TAP here.
Yep.
But all of the NADAC, the critical issues in the black community, that's the committee they got me also on with NADAC, who also, all of them, Thurston and Sampson, all of the guys in that committee, as well as Cynthia, of course, Marino.
Oh, yeah.
Right, gotta
I
thank
love her to
Cynthia.
death.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, these are folks that I did get a chance to say thank you yesterday.
My mentor in this field was Mel Schulstad. Mel Schulstad started NADAC.
Wow.
He was the founder of NADAC.
Really?
Yeah.
And was that had something to do with recovery?
Well, he was in recovery, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. But he saw a need for KDAC and NADAC, and each year NADAC gives out the Mel Schulstad Award in his honor.
Wow.
So, I mean, the history goes way, way back. The roots are deep, but the tree needs to keep growing.
It does. It does need to keep growing.
You keep doing what you keep doing, and you keep doing it well.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'll see you down the road, Joe.
All right.
Joe Powell. Nice to be with us on Recovery Coast to Coast. And if you'd like to learn more about Faces and Voices of Recovery, their website is facesandvoicesofrecovery.org. And if you'd like to learn more about Joe's organization, the Association of Persons Affected by Addiction, you can find them at recoveryiswhy.org, because recovery is why. We'll continue on Recovery Coast to Coast with some thoughts on long-term recovery from actor Dick Van Dyke, who has been sober nearly 50 years. That'll be coming up in just 30 seconds.
Are you afraid? Afraid of life without drugs and alcohol? There is help and hope at Sundown M Ranch. At Sundown, the focus is on you and your disease. You will learn how to live without depending on drugs and alcohol. Sundown M Ranch is nationally recognized for effective and affordable alcohol and drug treatment programs. Reclaim your life. Replace your fears with hope. Go to www.sundown.org right now to learn more.
Better shun the bait than struggle in the snare. John Dryden. When I was still drinking, I always identified with the messages in liquor ads. Even at the end, drinking cheap red wine by the gallon and sleeping on the beach, I was unwilling to let go of the idea of drinking as glamorous, romantic, and sophisticated. That's how strong my denial was. Even in sobriety, these ads can be seductive. However, when my mind occasionally and briefly veers off the track these days, it doesn't take much thought for me to come back to the reality of my alcoholism. I was driving along the freeway one day, for example, and saw a huge billboard advertising a brand of tequila. For a second or two, I was captivated by the full shot glass, the exotic and colorful background. As I recall, there were a garland of tropical flowers and a parrot in flight. But most captivating of all was the printed headline, "Anything can happen." Naturally, those words mean something entirely different to me than to normal drinkers. When I read them that day, I almost immediately thought of alcoholic blackouts, of coming to in unfamiliar surroundings, of realizing that I was in jail and not knowing why. When I read those words, "Anything can happen," I was reminded that if I pick up a drink, no matter what my motive or rationalization, there's no way of knowing or predicting what will happen to me. Thought for today: when I take the first drink, pill, snort, anything can happen.
Well, that wraps up edition 1516 of the national podcast, Recovery Coast to Coast. If you've enjoyed this edition of Recovery Coast to Coast, we'd love to hear from you. First of all, please hit the subscribe or follow button. It's free, and you'll be notified the next time we publish a podcast. Secondly, send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. Third, feel free to write a review of our ongoing podcast. And lastly, kindly tell one or two of your friends about what we're doing on this podcast. That also helps us to carry the message. And join us next time for Recovery Coast to Coast, America's voice for recovery. And if you know someone who's experiencing problems with alcohol or any other drug, here's a 24-hour national helpline that offers free information and confidential treatment referrals. Spanish-speaking individuals available as well. 1-800-622-HELP or 1-800-622-4357. And another shout-out to our sponsoring organization, the good folks at Sundown M Ranch, successfully treating individuals, including adolescents and their families, for well over 50 years. Sundown.org. I'm Neil Scott, reminding you to stay healthy, to live in gratitude, and to be kind to others. Remember, the bright side of addiction is recovery. Pass it on.